Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Rob, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you this morning?
I am wonderful, Sifu Raphael. How are you doing?
Oh, exceptional. Every day, getting a tiny little bit better, you know?
Yes, incremental progress is the way to go, for sure.
Very much. And sometimes it's minute. People don't even notice it. But as long as you notice it, I think that's incredible.
You know what I realize in life? When I've tried to take giant leaps forward, I would fall giant leaps backward.
Yes.
When I throw myself way outside of my comfort zone, it's like shock and awe. It's too much. When I take myself baby steps outside of my comfort zone, that always works the best.
Oh, absolutely. So I want to thank you so much for, and you had me on your show, and I had a blast, by the way. And I'm happy that you're here because I'm really looking forward to getting to know you so much more, because I see the man you are. You're a man of faith. You've done so much, and you continue to do so much. But we need to go to little Rob. We need to find out about your start. Where did you grow up? How were you influenced, and who were your biggest influences even before the age of 10? And then we'll get into the different people that touched your life along the way.
Wow, man. If you're gonna go back to little Rob, you got to call me Robbie then. That's what my mom
Let's
always
do it,
called me.
Robbie.
It was Robbie. I got rid of Robbie around like 8th grade. So
Okay.
that was a conscious decision. I got to be Rob and not Robbie.
Mm,
I grew up in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where I am now. So I planned on leaving this area several times, but I never did. I traveled around doing radio in a bunch of different places, but this was always my home base. And it's in central Pennsylvania. So central Pennsylvania, they say anything between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia is called Pennsyltucky. So I was right in the center of Pennsyltucky. And growing up, man, it's really interesting with my childhood. I do not have many memories of my childhood. Like, there are some, but there's not like a ton. So when you ask me about like who are my influences growing up, here's a couple that it's really interesting. When I was young, by the way, I love how you're starting this out, because I love to ask the question to people, what did they want to be when they were 10 years old? There's a really great sign there. When you're 10, you're young enough to know what you truly love at your core, and you're old enough to know what you truly love at your core, but you're young enough that the world hasn't like influenced you yet to like steer you in a direction the world wants you to go in. And so when I was 10, I wanted to be a professional wrestler. I loved professional wrestling. I was obsessed with professional wrestling. Hulk Hogan and Macho
Yes, I
Man, the
remember.
Ultimate Warrior, And then I loved radio. I loved radio broadcasting, and I listened to a lot of local radio. I didn't know like radio shows outside of my area, but I listened to local radio DJs, and I had a few guys. Tommy Edwards is one that comes to mind, that I listened to on a daily basis, and I would do pretend radio shows in my bedroom. So
That's
like
cool.
growing up, those were my two big influences: professional wrestling and radio broadcasting. That's where I was at.
So jumping off the third rope and getting into the nitty gritty of radio, you just brought a huge memory back to me. I must have been maybe 3. It was my first transistor radio. And man, I used to go to sleep with one little head, it had like headphones. So I used to put one in my ear and just go to sleep with it. And it didn't matter what was on. It was just that something was going on in my ear, and it was pretty incredible.
I love that. Yeah, I can remember, man, I had two CD players. So two like Walkmans, and I had like these speakers you'd plug into them, and I'd sit in my bedroom and I would pretend that I was doing like a top 9 countdown. And I think I only had like 6 CDs. So the top 9 was like the same artist over and over and over again. But I would do this every single night, man. Every night I would do that show. And I go back so I've done this, like I've coached myself and like, what was it about professional wrestling? What was it about radio? And for me, it was like this idea of reaching people. And radio is like, and wrestling, same thing. You get to be like a bigger version of yourself. It's like, I always heard professional wrestling described as, you take your personality and you turn it up to 20. Like, so this version of you is like this amplified over the top version of yourself. And radio is a lot of the same way. And I was a very shy kid. I was very introverted, did not know who I was. And I even wrote a chapter in an anthology about this, just about like how I figured out the real me, the true me. Because there was like a version of me that was always like stuck inside that I didn't know how to get out. And so I think I looked at wrestling, I looked at radio as a way to get that version of me out, right? It was like these over the top personalities allowed me to be the person that I was on the inside that I didn't know how to show just in like day-to-day life.
Wow. Big personalities. I mean, Hulk Hogan, come on. What a personality. And if you think about the size of this man, right? He was huge. And even when you look at him on TV and he towered over the other people, but it's also his persona, the way he presented himself. He wrapped himself up in those boas, I guess you call them. And he was a pretty charismatic individual. How did that help shape you in the way you thought of performing when you did eventually go into radio?
Well, it's really interesting. This is what I had to learn this lesson, and it was a really good lesson to learn. Because wrestling's way over the top. The classic, radio DJ, they're puking all over the microphone, talking like that, right? It's so over the top, it's not real and authentic. And I was about, I think, 15 years old when the internet came along, and it was like 1996.
Correct.
And, it's interesting that, like, as the internet came along, things started to change. As YouTube started to come along, a few years later, things really started to change. That it was no longer about, like, you didn't need a giant personality. You didn't need this fake personality. You needed to be real and authentic, and people wanted real and authentic people, like, to connect with. So when I was going into radio, and I did do professional wrestling for 6 months when I was 18, but it didn't last. I was done. But I was in radio. I always was like putting on a character, putting on a show. And my ex-wife would tell me, she was like, when you answer phone calls on the radio, you talk like the Rob that I know. But when you're just talking on the radio, just you talking about whatever, it's not the Rob that I know. It's like a character. And you can tell the difference. You should be more of just that person that's on the phone when you're talking to people who call in. You should just be that person. And I took that to heart of like, wow, yeah, I'm pretending to be what I think a personality is supposed to be.
Right.
Instead of just being me, which is an actual real personality, because I'm a person and I have a personality. And so the more I stepped into that, and I had one really great mentor who came along in my radio career. His name's Jojo, and his name's Dan, but he came along, and he was a pro. He's so good at what he did, and I learned so much from him on, like, he just was just himself. And so I had to learn, like, this old school style of radio, of this over the top personality. It was fake, it was like professional wrestling. It was, I'll say scripted, right? But it was fake. It wasn't real. And that helped me to realize like, oh man, if this is actually going to work and if I'm actually going to really connect with people, then I need to be authentic. And I didn't know it back then. I had no idea back then what I was doing, but I was also teaching myself to be authentic, like in real life, and not be a liar, not put on a front, not put on a show, not try to people please, but be authentically me. And that was scary because I didn't know who I actually was. I had to like learn me.
You had to find you.
Yeah. I had to go down inside myself and be like, who the heck am I really? And am I brave enough? Am I bold enough to be the person that I know that I actually am?
I bet that started in the 8th grade when you re-identified yourself from, you see, I listened to you, man. When you went from Robbie to Rob, how did that transition and how did people take it when you first started saying, hey, don't call me Robbie, I'm Rob?
You know, I don't know. I was such a shy kid. I don't know if I ever told anybody to not call me Robbie. I think I just started calling myself Rob, and I would write Rob, and I told my mom, but she didn't care. She was still calling me Robbie. I'm still my family. I'm still Robbie.
Gotcha.
But I think like in school, I don't know if I ever really told anybody. It was just like when I'd introduce myself or whatever, hey, I'm Rob, and it's just like, that's a good question, man, because I don't know. I can't remember, like, did I go around telling people this Robbie thing isn't going to fly anymore? Or if I was just like, hey, it's just Rob now. But I would introduce myself to people. I would introduce myself as Rob. That's a great question. I don't know how that process went and how long it even took, but it happened. It stuck. But I do know that it was kind of like a catalyst of, I got bullied pretty bad in 7th grade. And I was like, I'm going to join the wrestling team and I'm going to like try to figure this thing out. And that whole period of like, I was getting bullied and I joined the wrestling team and I just didn't want to be perceived. And I've always had kind of a baby face because I can't grow a beard, right? So like my cheeks used to be, oh, you can't grow a beard either.
Listen, if you put a gun to my head and said you have 30 days to grow a beard, you might as well shoot me now. It ain't happening.
You're gonna get this from me. This is all you're gonna get. Is that right there?
I can't even get that, you know?
Wow, man, that makes me feel so good, actually. You know, I was in 12th grade, and I remember I looked over at my friend Dave, and I was like, Dave, and he had this full beard, and I was like, guy's got a seriously nice beard. I'm like, Dave, your beard's so nice. Like, I can't wait till I grow one. He goes, you might never grow one. And I was like, what? And lo and behold, he was right. He's like, yeah, he said it's a summer beard. It's some over here, some over there. That might be what you have. I was like, yeah, you're right, man. All those years later, you're right. I never grew one. But that was, I think in 7th grade, that started. I knew I didn't want to be like a kid anymore, and Rob to me sounded grown up, and Robbie sounded like a little boy.
So when you were younger, say even in 5th grade, when somebody said to you, what's your name? You would probably say Robbie, right?
Oh yeah.
So you identified as Robbie. But then when you said, I don't want to be bullied, I want to be a little bit more mature, more grown up, and so you started introducing yourself as Rob. So mentally, you changed.
Yeah.
You talked about a beard. When I was in 5th grade, how old were you when you were in 5th grade?
Like 11.
Yeah. I was 10, and
I was probably 10 too, actually.
Yeah. And you were. And it's my first day in this new school that I was at. And I'm walking the hallways and I see this man coming, full beard, the whole thing. Oh, teacher, keep walking. Later on, this man is sitting behind me in my classroom.
In 5th grade?
in 5th grade.
Get the heck out of here.
He was not a teacher. He was another 10th grader. I mean, fifth grader, 10 years old, full beard, full
No
beard. I was like,
way.
I had to talk to him. I said, how on earth do you have a full beard? He goes, it just grows.
That's crazy.
I never met anyone like him before. And it just so happened, 5th grade, full beard. The teachers thought he was a teacher,
That is crazy.
and he was a tall kid too. So he had some, I can only imagine if they tell him to, shave and have a clean shave, and I'm sure the next day, poof, it's probably
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, it's like the Santa Claus. Remember the movie Santa Claus?
I remember that.
When he shaves and it pops right back. I remember I had a friend in 10th grade. He was in 12th grade, and his name was TJ, and he had the most grizzly beard I've ever seen in my life. And he looked like he was like in his 40s.
Mm.
And we were good buddies, but he was a bad alcoholic. And I looking back on it,
Wow.
I idolized him in 10th grade. Like, this is like the coolest dude ever. And looking back on it, I wonder whatever happened to him. He must have had a really rough life, because he would like wake up and drink and come to school like drunk.
Wow.
I imagine he was always very like rough. I imagine he had a really hard home life. But when I was a kid, I remember thinking like, wow, this guy's like a grown up. He's got a beard. He looks like he's 40. He's drinking in school. And it's crazy how I try to remember this as I get older. Like, my son's 9. And when you're 9 or 10, like, your perception of cool is like it can be so off. And my perception of cool was so off of what's actually cool,
Yeah. You make me, you talk about kids in school. In 8th grade, there was a kid that sat behind me, Keith. Kid was high. He was my homeroom teacher, and he was in another 2 classes of mine. He was high, and you can smell the pot on this kid. Early in the morning, throughout the day, and the kid was like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, and then he would like, because he sat behind me in one of my classes, you can always see he's like looking over, trying to cheat on me. And I was like, I didn't hide it, but I said, if you're going to cheat, whatever.
Yeah.
It's on you, it's not on me. But when you consider the fact that in 8th grade, this kid is high all the time. I mean, what's going on with his parents? Same thing with the friend that you had. What's going on with his parents?
Yeah.
In 10th grade, this kid was in 8th, this kid was in 10th, but still, it's got to be what happens at home. So I know we talked about beards, we talked about drinking, we
We're
talked
getting
about
deep.
and what?
I said we're getting deep. Beards and
We
drinking.
are getting deep. So when we consider the people that may have affected you at an early age, who would you say they were?
When you say affect, how do you mean?
Okay, I'm glad you asked. Because you can have somebody who has a positive effect on your life or negative. And it's what we do with what they give us.
Yeah.
Because I've had some of my best mentors have been terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And they either taught me what to do or what not to do. So, who affected your life?
You know,
Could be a teacher, could be a coach, could be
yeah,
anyone. Your parent,
I
uncle,
really
aunt.
a couple of thoughts come to mind. Of course, my parents were divorced, and I saw my like dad's side of the family every other weekend. My parents had an effect. I'm trying to think somebody who had like a significant like impact. Like, when I found out about this person, it like impacted me. And I was very impacted by music. So like I was just in love with music. It was like the mid 90s. Music was so good. And so a lot of my impact came from music. And I hate to say this, man, because this is where I was when I was that age. Like Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style came out, his first album. I loved rap. I
I
loved rap
remember.
music. That album had such an impact. My friend Josh stole it from his brother, and then we would listen to it.
Mm.
And so, like, smoking weed. That was like that's what that's what Doggy Style was about, basically. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then so that was a big influence. I can recall that being like very influential on me, which was not a good influence. It was just like all of the wrong things, and I didn't understand what was even happening in that album, but it seemed like super cool to me. And I was like, I don't even know what they're talking about, but this seems cool. And that, so not a profoundly good impact, but definitely had an impact. Another impact was Adam Sandler. I can remember Adam Sandler CDs that the What the Hell Happened to Me and They're All Gonna Laugh at You. I would listen to those albums for hours. My friends we'd have them in class and we'd listen to them. And they were just the funniest. For years, honestly, that's one of the things that got me into radio, was like I loved it was like comedy skits just in audio form. And I still listen to them today and I'll pee my pants listening to them. Like they're just so funny. It's funny and stupid, but that had a giant impact. So when you're asking that question, it's really interesting. Like I was going through later in life when I was learning about mentors, because I didn't learn about mentors till I was like in my 30s. And I was like, oh wow, I didn't like have anybody. And I didn't have bad people in my life, and I don't want it to sound this way. I did not have bad people in my life, but nobody really had like aim or purpose or direction or intention, And so I never had that. I didn't even know like an aim or direction. I was directed by the stuff I was watching, the stuff I was listening to. That's what directed me. And as I got older, I realized like, wow, no wonder I ended up, with addiction issues. No wonder I ended up confused and with low self-esteem, because I didn't have direction, and none of my friends really did either, right? And then as I did get a bit older into my teens, like I loved professional wrestling, so Stone Cold and The Rock and those guys all came along, so that was a big influence in my life. And it's funny to talk about this and look back, because I'm like, the way I think and live now, those people would never ever be anybody that would be an influence on me. Like not in a million years. It's amazing when I talk about it, how much my life has changed, how much my thought process and my circle has changed. It's really, just bringing that question up highlights like how directionless I was.
Well, it also impacts on the stages of your life, if you think of it, right? Because we go through stages in our lives, whether we want to accept them or not. I mean, childhood, right? Adolescents, teenagers, all these different stages, young adults, the actions we take. And then later on is how did they affect us? So everything that we do, the people, and when you say you had no one really directing you, you did. You just, because you're not in jail, you didn't kill
That's a really
anybody.
good point. Yeah.
So whether they made a huge impact or a tiny impact, they still made an impact in your life.
I guess what I mean is nobody was sitting me down, grabbing me by the shoulders and telling me what to tell me, like, this is right, this is wrong. But yes, definitely had influence, as we all do. But I never felt like there was a, like if I had to go back in time and I was in the situation, I'd be sitting me down. And I try to do this with my son on a regular basis, sit him down and give him like knowledge, like really try to give him wisdom. And he might not get it yet, but he's going to remember it later on, because if I could go back in time, I would sit myself down and tell myself certain things and like drill things into my head that I needed to have drilled into my head.
Yeah. Like, for example, I do the same with my kids. One of the things that I can see that has made an effect on both of my boys is the piggy bank. So I got them 4 piggy banks each, took them to the bank, opened 4 accounts for each one of them. And now they are really understanding money, what to do with it, how to save it, how to tithe, how to invest, all these different things that I taught them. So it did, and you know, taking them to the bank and opening up 4 accounts and all that. Some people are like, yeah, they're not going to realize it. But my little one, who's 19 now, my son just the other day turned on Tuesday, he turned 23. On the 20th, he turned 23. And the impact that I have on him, it's because I did the little things, you know, and the way he's living his life is a reflection of those tiny little things, those lessons I taught him along the way. And it wasn't like, you have to do this. No, this is what we're going to do. And for now, we're just going to do it. Okay. And my little one always, so I had they got 4 piggy banks: savings, investing, tithing, and fun. My little one always wanted to put all the money towards the fun one. And a lot of times I would say to them, you know, I would buy them stuff and whatever, toys and whatnot. But when they came to me and they go, Dad, I really want this toy. I said, oh, okay. How much is it? It's this much. I said, well, which piggy bank are you going to get it out of? They're like, oh, I have to buy it? I said, well, yeah. I bought you a toy just 2 days ago. Why do I have to go back to the store for you? Oh, okay. Can we just go looking? I said, sure. So this when Toys R Us was open, right? And so we go to Toys R Us, and they're looking and they're looking. I said, remember, I'm not buying you anything. Okay. Yeah, we got it. And of course, you know, kids are slick. And they go, hey, Dad, can you loan me the money?
Can we do a layaway?
Can you? And I go, well, you have money at home, right? Yeah. I said, so if you're going to buy this, the money's coming out of your piggy bank at home. They're like, huh? Maybe I don't need it. I said, you can get it, and I'll put it on the credit card. But when we get home, you have to give it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would think, they're like, huh, do I really want this? Because I got to empty out my piggy bank. Well, sometimes I would go, you know how much you have in your piggy bank? You're like, yeah, you know, $200. Okay. What you're looking for is $300 and something. Like, oh, I said, you don't have enough. Can you lend me the rest? I said, sure. When are you going to pay it back? So it's all the little, now they don't thank me for those lessons, but now they're very conscious about money.
Mm-hmm.
And they've made great investments, where I'm like, wow, did I really do that for them? Because when my son turns around, and the kind of car he's got 3 cars. I don't know why he's got 3 cars, and they're all high-end cars. And when he bought the last one, I was like, why do you buy it? He goes, I wanted it. I'm like, okay. I said, do me a favor. It's a fast car. I said, don't die, and just be careful, and be
Good
wise
advice.
with your investments. But the investment he made is if he resells the car, he'll make money. So he thought of it when he bought this very expensive car. So people sometimes guide you directly or indirectly because of their actions. Because sometimes as kids, we see what they're doing. So whether it was your wrestling coach or your English teacher or the kids who bullied you, they taught you something. Even the kids that bullied you taught you something.
Yeah, you know, I left one out in there. I was in broadcasting in high school the whole time I
Nice.
was in high school, and so Mr. Sipes was the broadcasting teacher, and he was the coolest guy because I learned then, like, I was on the morning announcements, you know, ran the character generator. I even had like my own show called Clubs of the Unknown, where I'd go and find like
Nice.
random clubs in the school that nobody really knew about, like the chess club and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And Mr. Sipes, Doug Sipes, he would let us like kind of have free reign to do whatever we wanted to do inside the boundaries of like what was allowed in school, you know. But we could leave. I'd have a 2-hour broadcasting class, and I could leave and go film stuff. Like if I had a plan, we could leave the school and have a pass and go film. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever too. Like, wow, we get to go like
Out of school. Yeah.
like I'm in school right now, out somewhere filming something for a project that I'm doing. That was really cool. So that definitely had an impact because it gave me a sense of like the freedom that I wanted to have in doing what I'm doing. And that led to a radio career where there's lots of freedom in that profession, sometimes too much freedom. And yeah, that was definitely a good learning experience. He was definitely somebody, he came into my life probably in 10th grade, that made a pretty big impact. I can't hear you anymore for some reason.
I turned my mic down.
There you go.
Mark Cox says hello.
Hey, Mark.
So I think he did that earlier. So when you consider the fact that you went into broadcasting, how did you get your first break into that station even? What was the catalyst for that?
Okay, I got to add another layer to this then, I guess, too, because my stepdad played a great role in this. You're bringing up different pieces of the puzzle. I was 15. My mom asked me, okay, I got to give credit to my mom. So here we go. There we go. Good job. Thank you, Raphael. You're leading me in the right direction here. My mom asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And I was like, I want to be a radio DJ. I remember her kind of looking at me like, oh boy, okay. But to her credit, man, she reached out, the radio station that I listened to, she set up a phone call for me with the guy who ran it. So I had a phone call. I came in, I was 15 years old, came in and sat down with him. I think my mom was there too. And he said he would hire me to do part-time work on Sunday mornings from 6 a.m. until noon. Wow. Now for a high school kid, and we lived in the country, so to get to the radio station was like a half an hour drive. So we had to leave at like 5:30 a.m. After being in school all week long. And I was not exactly the most motivated kid, so I was a little bit lazy. And I remember thinking, and I would love to go back and know what I said in these moments that like, wow. 'Cause I don't know what I said or like what my attitude was, but my attitude couldn't have been great because I'm a 10th grader getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. Like who the heck wants to do that?
Most kids are sleeping at that point.
Yeah.
They're waking up at 1 o'clock.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's what I wanted to do. And so my stepdad was super cool about it. He would wake up with me and drive me into the radio station. Then he went and played tennis. And then he'd pick me up afterwards. But man, that was a whole year of them doing that before I got my driver's license, and then I did it for myself. But I would get up at 5 a.m. on Sunday mornings, drive into the radio station, and then I was supposed to do a 5-minute news break. At 15 years old, I'm doing a 5-minute news break on an AM radio station, and I wish to God I had tapes of it because I would butcher it. I mean, it had to be. I remember like the guy who was helping me would like stare at me through the window, and just like I remember the look on his face was just like, oh, what are we doing? Because I probably got through like one news story in 5 minutes, and the news story is like a paragraph because I was just such a mess. And I was always so nervous. Remember, my stomach would be in knots going in there. And I would go in, I'd do that news break, and then a guy, John Koza, he ran a polka variety show. So I had to play the CDs for him on this polka variety show. And I was a kid, I'd fall asleep. In between songs, I'd fall asleep, and it would be dead air. And he'd come over and bang on my table and be like, Rob, wake up. I'm like what's going on? I was just such a goof. And then Yeah, so
But
that
they
was my
kept you.
first experience.
They
But
they kept you, even though you were a goof, right?
that was
So
kind of
kudos
like
to them.
that was the whole point of that Sunday morning, was like, if you could show up, basically, you could stay. And
Mm,
I showed up, so I stayed, and I eventually worked my way up through the ranks from 15 years old on. Yeah.
wow. So when did you get your break?
And man,
Your real break?
just to go back to that for a second, I got to give credit to my mom, because that was like
Mm,
I look back on that, what a breakthrough moment. That she straight up asked me, what did I want to do? I told her, and she helped me do it. Like, God bless. I love her. That's such a, and my stepdad for taking me in there every Sunday. Like, so grateful for that.
yeah.
And for Tommy for giving me the job, for the polka guy for not losing his mind on me for falling asleep. So many different people on that. My big break, there were several of them. I got a full-time job in radio when I was 20. So
Mm,
when I was 20, I got my first full-time, or maybe I was 21. I was 21. I was working at a Hooters, and I was doing part-time radio, and they had a spot for the night show open. So that was my first full-time break. But I
mm,
think the big breakthrough came for me years later, when I started doing the morning show. Right, I got a morning show spot on a radio station, Hot 100, and I resisted it. So there was a lot of breakthroughs there. Because I got a night show host. I did that for 5 years. Then I was a afternoon show host on a station. I did that for 3 years. Then I became a music director. So I programmed all the music for the station. That was a big break.
mm.
Probably got that in my mid-20s. Then I got the program director position, which basically I was in charge of a radio station, right? So I was the person in
Wow.
charge of the station. And I did that for a number of years. But then I had the chance to get a morning show spot, and I was always really afraid of getting a morning show spot, just because I had to wake up super early every day. And also
Mhm.
I thought, like, that's a lot more talking on the air. That's a lot more of my personality that's going to come out. And I didn't know, because I was still stuck in this mentality of, I have this persona that I had, right? It was like I was a radio persona, not myself as a personality on the radio.
Right.
And I resisted that job. I resisted that morning show job for probably 6 months. And we kept bringing people in to hire them to do the morning show. And these people were train wrecks. Like, the one guy was doing drugs in the bathroom.
Oh
The
my
one
gosh.
guy wouldn't show up for the job. Um, so, like, basically, I stumbled and fumbled my way into doing a morning show. And I was kind of like kicking and scratching my way into it, like resisting it. And
Mm,
then once I got into it, man, something changed in me. Just like, okay, you're forced into this spot. You've tried to resist it. Now you're here. Like, I learned how to embrace it, and it opened up a whole new world for me, man. It really changed who I was as a person, changed who I was as like a broadcasting professional, because I started to like own it, and I started to realize, like, I'm actually pretty good at this. And I started getting really good feedback from people who were listening. And
mm,
I would say, for as far as like the big breakthrough, that was huge. That lasted about 5.5 years to 6 years before I left radio altogether. And
mm,
man, that was just so much fun. It was so, I still kind of like, I mean, I miss it because it was so much fun. But just the radio industry in itself it's old. It's an old industry. And I didn't feel like I was valued the way that I should have been valued, which is why I left. Um, but that was such a breakthrough for me, because I learned how to be myself. I learned,
mm,
it's really interesting, man. Like, and I teach people this I help people with podcasting, like starting their podcast and how to launch their podcast. And something you don't hear talked about very often when people are launching a podcast, you don't hear people ever talk about the growth you experience as a human being by learning
mm,
to talk at length and learning to listen to people and ask questions and be attentive. Like, to learn to be a good broadcaster makes you a much better person, a much better human being. I learned so much from that radio show, from doing that morning show. I learned how to be me, and I learned how to
mm.
be comfortable being me. And I learned that, like, when I'm myself, people really they tune in. Like it's like literally tune into the radio, but they tune into like who you are and they connect with you. And so
Right.
that's something I love to teach people, that because that's like an unspoken, very valuable lesson that you learn from like what you and I are doing right now. It's super powerful. It's transformative.
It sure is. What on earth possessed you to teach people how to be better podcasters? And why go into that avenue? And because I know you have your own show and we're going to talk about that, but you did you start your show first and then you realize, wow, I need to help some other people?
Well, people started coming to me because I was doing, when I left radio in 2017, I had a podcast and I started a digital marketing company. And so as I was running the digital marketing company, I was teaching people about digital marketing. So I was hosting workshops and people started asking about podcasts. Because I did a podcast and I had like over 400 episodes at that point. And in my local area, it was doing really well. I had monetized it and had, like 6,000 downloads a month. It was like doing really well. And people started to approach me about starting their own podcast. And the wall that people kept running into, it wasn't the equipment. They would buy the equipment. It wasn't like to get it set up and get it on Spotify or get it on, Apple or whatever. They could do that. It was like, what am I going to talk about? How do I talk? What do I say? How do I interview somebody? I don't like how I sound. I don't like how I look if we were doing video. Like all of these things freaked them out. And I was like, wow, this never occurred to me. It's interesting, right? When your superpowers, like we all have our own unique gifts that we have. Mm-hmm. When you have that gift, you don't realize that other people don't have the gift. And so I started to realize, wow, people don't know how to be okay seeing themselves on camera. They don't know how to be okay hearing themselves on a microphone. They don't know what to talk about because they've never had to like talk about something in a professional manner. And so I started to coach them on like, well, you have to this is what I would coach them on. I'd say, listen, get your phone out, set it up to record, and you don't need to ever release anything, but you need to start talking into that phone and recording yourself. And then you need to watch it back and you need to be okay with it. Like as simple as that. Like if you're going to do anything, if you're going to make content of any form, you better get used to hearing yourself talk and why am I talking? What is the purpose to what I'm doing? And I know lots of people will become very successful talking nonsense. And I guess I did that in radio too. I talked a lot of nonsense, but there was a purpose behind it. And so I try to steer people in a direction of like, you need to have a vision. You need to have a purpose for what you're doing. Why am I doing this? What is the reason for why I'm doing this? And if you talk about something that you love, then you can talk about it forever. But if you're trying to talk about something that you think you should talk about because it's going to get you somewhere, you're going to have a really hard time talking about that thing. And people are going to see through it. So that led me to just coaching in that realm of helping people come out of their shell and learn more about themselves. And I think that's the unspoken part of podcasting that is really important, that I love seeing people realize like, oh wow, this is who I really am. I'm really coming out of my shell as a human being. I'm really, like I said at the beginning of all this, that person that's inside of you, learning how to get that person out. I love seeing that in people. So that's why I coach in that direction, because it's the make your mess your message. That was the mess that I had, that going through this process of broadcasting taught me how to be myself. I want to help other people with that, take that mess of like, they want to figure themselves out and make it the message that they can use to put out there to the world.
Is that why you decided not only to coach on podcasting, but as a leadership expert, just to help people like get out of their own way, right?
Yeah, man. Because I had to get out of my own way, and I'm still getting out of it. Like we're always on the process of getting out of our own way. Mm-hmm. But like, I want to help other people figure that out. And I always man, I would hide. I was a wallflower. I'd hide in the background. I didn't want anybody to see me. Don't look at me. Don't ask me anything. Don't even think that I'm capable of anything, because I don't want to be exposed as a fraud or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And the more I learned, like, the only way I'm going to be happy and joyful in life, the only way I'm going to be satisfied and content is if I take leadership responsibility for what's going on with me. And this is something that I denied for years. I knew I was learning about it and denying it. Like, oh gosh, I don't want to be in charge of my life, because that means if it screws up, then I screwed up. If it fails, that means I fail. But then as you learn, and like, there's no failing as long as you keep going. Like, you fail forward. It's experiments. Life is a bunch of experiments, and God created our life to be an adventure. And when we play it safe, we're not living in the adventure of our life. And I want my life to be an adventure, and I want to help other people realize that too. And you have to be a leader. For life to be an adventure, you better be a leader, because you don't want to go on somebody else's adventure. You want to go on yours.
Right. Unless the adventures are just a lot of fun, you can do that.
Well,
too.
yeah, I should. Well, sure. I don't want to live somebody else's life, right? I want to
Correct.
live my life.
Correct. You don't want to live Hulk Hogan's life, because we don't know the pain he's been through, right?
Well, he's had
So,
like 20 back surgeries. That guy's had a lot of pain.
yeah, he's had a lot of pain, and he's given a lot of pain too. So,
Yeah.
let me ask you, you're known as an entrepreneur, but most importantly, in your bio, you put Rob is also a Christian entrepreneur. Why is that important for people to know that about you?
So I've been a Christian for going on 7 years now. I got saved back in 2020. And I was a Christian for 3 years, but I hadn't officially been baptized or saved for till 3 years into that.
So 2020, you were baptized?
2020, I was baptized. I was baptized when I was a little kid. I was a baby, but I
That's
don't really
different.
count that. Yeah.
You didn't make that choice.
I didn't make I was in my diaper. I didn't make that choice. Robbie didn't make the choice. Rob did.
That's correct.
And just as I'm learning more about my faith, I'm learning how to step more boldly into my faith. This was a part of this being who I was created to be, like this version of me. I'm a closet Christian. I go to church and I talk about it with my Christian friends, and I pray at home, but I'm not talking about it outside of those walls, And I have to honor God in everything that I do. Like that's what I have to do, because none of what we do is from us, and all the glory has to be given to God. And so I had to put that Christian in front of my entrepreneur, because I had to let people know why this was happening. Even if they didn't know me, when they first see my bio, I want them to know, like, I got to give the glory over to the Creator. It's not me doing this. And it's also a reminder to myself. So when I see that, it's like, right, when I'm making decisions, or when I'm, angry or frustrated about something, or feel like I'm getting screwed over or about to screw somebody over, I need to remember you're a Christian entrepreneur. You're not just an entrepreneur. You have that Christian in there so that it keeps me focused, and it also gives people a frame of reference for my mindset, and it honors God. So
would you say it keeps you righteous?
Yeah.
That's beautiful. When you consider your life, when you look back, and I'm making you do that today, so there you go.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Thank you.
And when you look back, there are moments in time that you made decisions that affected your days, your months, your years. What's one decision that you can say, wow, I didn't realize I was making it, but it has been the best decision I've ever made? And you don't have to tell me what it is, but do you recall it?
Oh, I'll tell you what it is. I know what it is. It was leaving my radio job and starting my own company. I mean, that decision was on paper not wise. I had everything going for me in my profession. I had put almost 2 decades into this career. I loved it, but I knew it wasn't the right thing for me. I knew it wasn't the right thing. This is interesting, man, because when we would record commercials in the radio station, the end date for if something was going to run forever, like if it was going to like be evergreen and just run forever, the end date was 12/31/37. So, December 31st, 2037. That was the end date. And so when that end date came up, when the year 2037 would come up, they had to like get a whole new system. I remember sitting there thinking like, dear God, am I going to be here in 2037? Is this going to be me still? And people in the company were dying. Like radio is weird. Like it's one of the most unhealthy professions in the world, which is just strange. There's a lot of unhealthy people in radio. And so I had close friends to me pass away that I really was very tight with. And I thought, man, I can't be doing this in 2037 with people passing away. I've got to do something different. And this was just like a repeating every day when I'd record commercials, I'd see that 12/31/37. And I was like, I need a way out, but I don't know what to do. And I had built a decent social media following from being on the radio. So I learned digital marketing through some courses. And I was like, I got to leave. I feel like I'm at the top of my game right now with what I'm doing, but I have to go. Like it has to happen. And it was so scary. And I was being advised not to. But I was like, I know I have to. And it's been, the entrepreneur journeys, it's hard. It's been hard. It's been rewarding. It's been life-changing. And I was this is how I know it's such a significant choice in my life. I've tracked my life before I left my radio career and then after. And I've grown like times 10 since I've left then than before. I grew like a little bit over the years in radio, but I mostly just grew in my profession, not as a human being. Right? So when I left radio, like I've grown because I had to. And that's one of the things I think that doesn't get talked about enough for entrepreneurs either. When you start a business, like get ready for the personal growth, because if you're not doing personal growth, you're going to have a really hard time succeeding, because your business will only grow as much as you grow.
Oh yeah. I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years now. So, and I've had several different businesses. So without a doubt, you need to grow. You need to adapt. For example, in my physical locations, people walk in, they're like, whoa, what happened? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you changed the place. I'm like, yeah, I got bored. It's like, what? I go, yeah, I got bored. So they say every 10 years you should be changing things. I'm like 3-4 years. I change things. I paint walls. I move walls. I change the layout. And people are like, wow. And the reason I do that is because I want to keep my customers on their toes. I want them to know that change is inevitable. We're going to move forward. And a lot of times I'll say to my clients, what do you think? What do you think about this or that? And they're like, oh, I love it. I'm like, okay, what do you hate about it? They're like, well, I just told you I love it. I understand that. But what would you change if you could? And all of a sudden the truth comes out.
Yeah.
Because we have to ask that question as an entrepreneur, is when people just tell you what you want to hear because they don't want to hurt your feelings. But we actually have to go, yeah, thank you for that. But if you can change it, if you had a magic wand, what would you do differently? And then that's when you listen. That's when you go, okay, I'm listening, because that's when the truth comes out. So when people say, oh, I like this, I like the functionality, this, that, I wouldn't change a thing. Okay, great. But if you could, what would it be? And then they go, well, and then all of a sudden the truth starts to slowly flow out. And when you ask enough, you can't just go by one person anyway. You can't, right? You have to ask many people. And when the same answers come out, the same changes, then you go, now I know what to do. So a lot of times it's just listening that as an entrepreneur we can grow, and that's you can do that with your client. It doesn't matter whether you have a physical location or virtual location nowadays. It's listening to your customers that's going to help you grow as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You have created, as a Christian entrepreneur, you're the founder of the Unstuck movement. What does that mean, Unstuck movement? Because I love it, but tell us what made you come up with that. What was that moment that you go, this is the name I want to name it. This is it.
Well, I was stuck and I needed movement in my life. I was stuck. I went through a 3-year like separation and divorce from my ex-wife, and I was really stuck. I had
Mm,
left my well, I had gotten trained in coaching, um, but I was still like in the digital marketing space, and I was like in between those two worlds. I knew I was supposed to still be doing broadcasting because that was like going back to the whole 10-year-old self thing. That was like something at 10 years old I loved, and I know it's supposed to be a part of my life, and I wasn't doing that either at the time. And I was living in an apartment that my parents had. They have property, and when I got divorced, I moved into one of their apartments. They were helping me pay the rent.
mm,
Like I was just stuck. It was a bunch of debt. I was just really, really stuck. And I was praying about it. I was just trying to figure out like what is the purpose to my life? What am I supposed to be doing, God? Like give me some sort of direction. And the thing I kept hearing come up, and then while I was doing coaching while I was doing this, so I was coaching people, right? And I kept hearing the word stuck. I kept
mm.
hearing the people, I'm stuck here, I'm stuck there. And I'm like, yeah, me too. I'm stuck too. And what do we need when we're stuck? We need movement. We need to move. We need action. We better take some action. And I had to take my own advice. So I was like, the unstuck movement. Like, I want to create a movement with what I'm doing. I want it to be based around breakthrough, right? So, what's the opposite of being stuck? Having a breakthrough, you know, getting past the thing. Um, and so that was just kind of the concept was I want to tell these stories of how people got unstuck from really difficult places in their life, professionally and personally, and like have that be an example for me, have that be an example for other people so they can go to this platform and every episode is going to give them more proof that it's capable, it's possible for them, and that they're capable for having those breakthroughs because everybody on the show came from something difficult, had a difficult situation, either personally or professionally in their life, and they were strong enough to have the breakthrough. They persevered enough to find a breakthrough. And
Mm.
so that's the tagline for the Unstuck movement is true testimonies of breakthrough, because I want these to be a testimony just for anybody. Like these are real, true stories. This isn't like a fictional kind of thing. No, this is how people got unstuck, and you can do it
Mm.
too.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And when you consider, I don't care if you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth, that you still look at all the celebrities, all the drug abuse, all the different things that happen to some people. We all feel stuck sometimes, and it's finding that drive, that person, that desire to move on. I think that's definitely what you're hitting at, and it happens to everybody, and I don't think there's anyone safe from being stuck, right?
For sure.
So Rob, you also I love the your website leadimpacttransform.com. What is that doing for people who come to it? What can they expect when they come to your website?
Well, expect I'm here to help them find the breakthrough that they need, right? So
Mm,
I mostly work with business owners, but I also work with just individuals. who are trying to figure out this walk in life. So when they go to the website, they can expect to get information on what a leader actually is. Like what is leadership? What is a true leader? What does that mean? But then what does a leadership coach do for them? And you and I both know this, and anybody who's ever had a coach, and I love that this is called Coaching Call. I love that the beginning of this episode, your intro is like sports coaches, martial arts coaches, business coaches, because coaching is for every facet and every walk of life, not just for a sport. And I live in a fairly, you could say, backward kind of area, because we're kind of like stuck in the past, and this concept of coaching, like I only work with people right now outside of my area. I don't work with anybody in my city because the concept hasn't been grasped yet of like what is the power of a coach. And having a therapist is great, but the therapist helps you heal the past. The coach helps you look towards the future. And that's where I want to be in the future. I want to be in this future version of me. So when you go to the website, understand, I help to explain what a leader is. I help you understand what a leadership coach is, and why we all should have a coach. Every coach better have a coach, or they shouldn't be a coach.
Bam, right there. Without a doubt.
That should be an essential part of it. But when you go to the website, it's just, if you want to excel in your life, if you want to move into the future, the way I explain it is like I guide people who are leaders, who want to be a leader in their life, from where they are now to where they're destined to be. My job, my coaching profession, is in that gap between where you are right now and where you're destined to be. That's where I do the work. That's where every coach does the work. So I want that website is like to help explain, like, we sit in that gap and help you figure that part out, because that's where the breakthroughs happen, in that middle ground.
Yeah. I love how you said we sit in the gap, because that you have something missing. That's where the gap is, right? And that you help them fill it. That's beautiful. If my coaches that I have didn't have coaches, I would be a little worried. And
Right.
one of the things that I always tell people, because this is Coaching Call, and I've spoken to all sorts of coaches, from swimming coaches to theater coaches to how to get an audition coach, how to read a script coach. It does not matter, but there's all different kinds of coaches. I mean, think about who was your first coach: your parents, babysitters, anybody who inspired you to do something. I got to be telling, and I said to you earlier, sometimes your best coaches are the ones that hurt you the most. Those are the ones you learn the tough lessons from, right?
Yeah.
So when you consider, anybody out there listening to us, if you're going to hire a coach, I think one of the questions is to ask, and you said it, do you have a coach? Because if they go, I don't need a coach, go, okay, thank you, have a great day. And move on to somebody who does have a coach, because we all need somebody to talk to. Even therapists have therapists, and those therapists have other therapists.
A therapist better have a therapist. If you're taking in all that past stuff from people, and you're not having somebody to process that through, man, that would be a hard road.
It is. So I want to thank you for today. I think I learned a little bit more about you. So thank you for that. And you're still an onion, my friend. So we got to keep peeling. And I look forward to continued friendship and collaborations and all these fun things. What's one thing that you would tell somebody that if they did today can make an impact in their lives?
If they did it today, it would make an impact in their life. I would ask myself this question. I've been asking a lot of people this question lately, and I love the question because it really makes you think. If there was one thing that would make a significant impact in your life, it would make a dynamic shift, a dynamic change in your life, and it would bring you more fulfillment in every aspect of your life, what would that thing be? It's something that you would have to do. You've probably been thinking about doing it. And when you do it, it's going to dynamically change everything in your life. What would that thing be? And you might not know the answer right away, but think about it, because it's going to highlight something to you that's going to be unavoidable.
Great question. And I'm gonna add a little bit to it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Pray on it. Right.
Okay. That's a good addition. I like that.
Because if you pray at night, the answer may come in the morning. It may.
Mhm.
And you may have to pray for a while for the right answer to come. So I pray every day for the right answers because
Same.
I don't have them all. I don't have them all, but I know He
Same.
does. So there you go.
Amen.
Thank you, my friend. This was incredible. Thank you again for your time. I know how valuable it is. And everybody listening, go to leadimpacttransform.com and get in touch with Rob. He's the man.
Thank you, Raphael. You're awesome. And I love the name Raphael. What a cool name to have. I'm jealous of that name. It's so good. You're an amazing
You can
man.
use it from time to time if you like.
Okay, thanks.
Rob Raphael.
There we go. Robbie Raphael.
Hey, oh, that's the little guy. All right, my friend. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you.